Thank you, Marissa.
So we don't have restrictions, but you have to get a permit. Yeah.
Is that,
Yeah.
Living?
I start my new position in a week, so I know.
all right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order. It is 7 o'clock, and today is Monday, January 23rd. Before we get to the items on the agenda, I'm hoping my colleagues, as well as members of the community in the chamber, will join me in standing and taking a moment of silence for the victims in Monterey Park, California, as well as Baton Rouge and Shreveport, Louisiana. Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, go to item B, discussions. We have one item here, tobacco licensing, Franklin County Public Health. And for this, I'd like to turn things over to President Renner to introduce our guests.
Thank you. Good evening. This is just a continuation from last year. We heard from an activist, 21, who came before us and talked to us about the licensing program at the Board of Health, and I thought naturally we should probably hear it from the authors themselves. So I want to go ahead and turn it over to Teresa Seagraves and Lindsay Rodenhausen. And if you guys could just introduce yourselves and that kind of thing.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Teresa Seagraves.
I don't think that's on.
on now. All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Teresa Seagraves, and I'm one of the Assistant Health Commissioners at Franklin County Public Health, and I'm also the Director of Health Systems and Planning, and that is an area where most of our programs that are not mandated reside. So that includes all of our tobacco work.
And good evening, everyone. My name is Lindsay Ronenhauser. I am a division manager within our Division of Health Systems and Planning, and I also oversee our care coordination programs, which consists of our community health workers linking residents to not only medical services, but also social services.
So do you want us to just describe the TRL program, or?
Sure, please, and I think my colleagues, some of us may have questions about that, and then introduce anything else that you guys will, provide from the Board of Health, Public Health, sorry. Board of Health is still, it sticks with me, it's so old anymore, but thank you.
All right, no problem. So many of the cities here in Franklin County really approached us. We kind of started with one city, Hilliard, and they were really concerned because they were getting complaints from the schools that more and more youth were using tobacco products, that there were so many tobacco retailers within the school distance from the school that were selling to kids. And so they really wanted to do something about that. And they didn't want to just punish kids without having addressed the real issue, which is the retailers and them selling to underage kids, but also the types of products that they were selling. So we had some conversation, we did some back and forth. We talked about what could Franklin County Public Health do, what services could we provide, and then what would be the responsibility of the city. Dublin had done this not to the full extent, but they had implemented a TRL after the Tobacco to 21 law passed. And so we had some, experience working with them and implementing it, and we just took that as the baseline and then expanded on it. So what we are considering and what Hilliard has really signed off on is they put an ordinance in place. Their ordinance has been approved, that we would act on their behalf to go in and we will, well, the state actually does this, but identify the retail providers, and we will go in and license them all. So they are now, as part of their ordinance, requiring their retailers that sell tobacco products to be licensed. Our part of that, and the licensing part is a lot of administrative paperwork. So we would provide the application to the retailer. They would need to complete the application. That would come back directly to Franklin County Public Health. We would process it, and then we would go out and engage with the retailer as far as education. So providing any staff person that works in that particular retail establishment with training, training about, the ordinance, the law, training about tobacco products and what is really in the tobacco products, training about the signage that's required in every establishment that is licensed, where that signage has to be. So all of that we would do after the training. Then we would issue the license. There would be a fee for the license. And as we dealt with Hilliard, one of the considerations was both They wanted the fee for the license to be enough to get the attention of the retailers, but also, we are not in the position at Franklin County Public Health to do this work without some type of fee or cost associated with it. We just don't have that staffing capacity. It is a lot of administrative work on, the front side with training, going out, all of the signage, we provide that. We don't charge for the signage, we provide it all. But, so there's a lot of cost involved in putting this in place. And so Hilliard has identified the fee as $500. That's what they're going to charge all the retailers. In addition to the licensing piece, and of course, we would keep all of that information in our database, in our system. There would be annual checks. So we're planning to do compliance checks, and right now, what we've kind of thought about and what Hilliard agreed to was 2 annually compliance checks, but we would also do underage buys. And that's a big part of this, is kind of how it started. So we would do that. Any retailer that was found to be not in compliance with the ordinance, we would issue a warning. We would go back and to make sure that anything that was out of compliance had been corrected. And this is in addition to the annual check. So we would go back, we would follow up. All of this would be in writing to the retailer. And then if they still weren't in compliance, that's when fees and penalties begin to apply. And of course, every city can identify their own, fees and penalties. But Hilliard did come up with a list for themselves. And of course, with each occurrence, that penalty grows. It becomes greater. And there's also the option, if the retailer just doesn't come into compliance, their license can be suspended or revoked. At that point, that would require an investigation. We would go out, we would do that to make sure that they were still out of compliance. We would draft up all the letters. Those would be sent. Of course, they would have a certain number of days to come into compliance. If they didn't, then their license could be suspended or revoked. In Hilliard's case, they have given Franklin County Public Health and our health commissioner the authority to make that decision about revoking or suspending the license. So that's kind of the big picture. There's, of course, a lot more detail involved. There is a part that we're still kind of carving out. If someone has their license revoked or suspended, they can appeal. There is an appeals process. And who hears the appeal is the piece that we're still kind of talking about. It doesn't make sense for us to hear the appeal when we're the ones who are suspending or revoking the license. So we're thinking that the city may need to be the one to hear the appeal. And of course, we could work with the city, we could provide any additional information, but to just have us hear the appeal didn't quite seem right. So we are working that part out, but that's sort of big picture. And both Lindsay and I can happy to answer any questions you might have. I know that was a lot in a little bit of time, but happy to respond to questions.
Thank you, Ms. Seagraves and Ms. Rodenhauser. Questions from colleagues?
I
Yes, Ms. McGregor.
If it's not being enforced now, why do you think it will be, your program will be successful? I mean, it's been a law since like 2017, or what, 2 years ago?
So the reason that most of the we're thinking and the state is thinking is because there's not been compliance behind it. So yes, the law has been in effect, but there's nobody going out to retailers and checking and saying, oh, you're doing this, you're not doing that, oh, you have your signage up or you don't have signage up. So retailers aren't doing that right now because nobody's enforcing the law and making them. Columbus has been enforcing it more consistently for longer than any other city, and they believe it's working there. And so that's the piece that we all think was missing.
And if I can just add, currently, the state does underage buys. Again, these are for tobacco, cigarette retailers, I should say, so tobacco, cigarette. We know that the youth are being impacted by vape shops and vaping. And so that is something that this TRL, tobacco retail license, would include, so those vape shops as well. And then also with the current underage buys, they are, if an underage buy would occur, that penalty or that misdemeanor goes directly to the individual who sold. So the cashier, the clerk. And what we know is a lot of the time, the owner of the establishment is telling their staff or clerks, it's okay, go ahead, but they're actually the ones, the clerks or the cashiers are the ones who are, that penalty is being enforced, and that fine. And so really this is to educate the establishment, the owner, and then hold the owner accountable and not necessarily the cashier or clerk. But again, really, this isn't supposed to be a penalty, but more, again, that education compliance piece that we're currently missing.
I have a question.
Ms. Andrew?
At one point, I don't know if it was a year ago, 2 years ago, or if it never happened at all, I thought vaping was being taken out, that you could not vape anymore. And there were a lot of the vaping areas were like, is that true or not? Or was that just something I made up?
No, I mean, I know that there's been a lot of discussions around vaping and vape stores, vape shops. But right now, what we're seeing and the trend is they're actually increasing at a much higher rate. And also with vaping, you can buy online, the cartridges and things like that. So that is one thing that they're trying to enforce is the online and having some type of, ID check and things like that, where in previous years, that was not the case. Someone could just put in a date, say they were 21 and buy online.
And it seems to me that for the wellness of this, and you being medical people, that we would want to be trying to get rid of vaping, because vaping has been a serious thing.
Yes, and that's part of our education, because people tend to have the impression that vaping is better for you, and it's really not. So again, all of that is part of the education that we would do with retailers and their staff.
And also then, we're talking about tobacco as well, and
Yes, all tobacco products.
all tobacco products. Just to put things
So
back in.
the only sort of caveat to that is when we started this, the whole flavor ban was still up in the air. So it was not specifically addressed at that time in our TRL process, but, you know, we're willing to include it for the cities that choose to go in that direction.
All right, thank you for that.
Ms. Bowers?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I know there's a lot of discussion around this issue around the region, and so it's good to hear it from you and in terms of what Franklin County Public Health is doing to support these policy considerations. So a couple of questions that I have. So is the tobacco retail license currently, would it include vape stores that only sell nicotine products and not tobacco-specific cigarettes?
Yes, we're including all tobacco products as part of this, so yes.
Okay. And then the question I had maybe specific to the scope of services template that we have in front of us, it references a board. Do you know what that is in reference to?
Yeah, so typically when we contract with anyone, we have a 5-member board of health that governs us as the public health entity. So usually our contracts all say Franklin County Public Health Board. And so that's the board that we're referring to. Now, I will say, and I think Lindsay and I learned this today, that language was changed just a little bit. Instead of saying the board, we're saying the health commissioner now, because we really do want it to be more in-house versus the board making those decisions.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And just because we've had just one other introductory kind of conversation on this topic so far, but as representatives of Franklin County Public Health, the FCPH is putting resources behind implementing this program. And could you speak a little bit as to the public health policy and public health concerns behind why you're putting resources behind this?
Yeah. So I'll start, Lindsay, you jump in. So here in our county, consuming tobacco products is behind some of our leading causes of death for individuals, whether that's lung cancer or other forms of cancer. Those are some of the really, really concerning and pressing issues that we are faced with, and that's what our data is showing us. And we know also from the data that it is the consumption of tobacco products and the content of what's in the tobacco that is really leading to some of the just chronic conditions that many of the residents in Franklin County are dealing with. We are also very, very concerned because our youth are starting to use tobacco products at an earlier and earlier age. We also know, based on the data, that oftentimes tobacco can be the gateway to other drugs. So for all of those reasons, but I think the youth population really beginning to embrace and consume more tobacco with the vaping, with the flavored tobacco products is really concerning. Our teachers are having to deal with this on a day-to-day basis when school is in, and oftentimes we're asked, well, where are the parents? Sometimes the parents don't even know that their children are consuming these products, but the teachers know. So those are some of the really concerning issues for us as a public health system, and each one of those issues that I brought up are things that we address. Lindsay, please feel free to add.
Again, I would just add to Teresa's point, especially with our youth and our teens, and the flavor products. We know, and research has shown, if you look 50, 60 years ago, tobacco products, the options look different. Now, youth and even adults are given so much access, and different kinds and different flavors. So it doesn't taste like tobacco. The nicotine levels are much different. And as a result, you're getting kind of addicted. You're not kind of, you are, you're addicted. And so, but then the costs too, the costs of these tobacco products, of the vaping. And so, what I would just say is all of these trends, tobacco and nicotine has always been an issue, but, we're seeing rates increase. We're seeing youth rates increase. I have two nephews. They're 5 and 2. And, I have this is a personal story, but my 5-year-old nephew is about to go into kindergarten, and during the PTA, a first grader had, in his book bag a vaping product, and they shared that at the PTA meeting, and so, and passing it around and at recess. So that's, kind of where we're going with a public health standpoint, is just wanting to protect our future generations, but protect our residents too.
We hear more and more of those stories every day. And that's why, the data does support that the initiation of these products is younger and younger. This is our attempt to help do something to combat that.
Thank you. Mr. Renner.
Yeah, thank you again, Teresa and Lindsay, for being here. So far, we're talking about just the licensing of a tobacco retailer, and you going in and saying, okay, here's some do's and don'ts, in accordance with, if I heard you correctly, with a tobacco 21, the state law, right? So I don't think I've heard anything that should scare any retailer. If they're being a good retailer anyway, who cares? So maybe they have to pay a fee, but, times change. So what if, and could you speak to, could we regulate in this the types of products, and what are some of the tolerances that we can do? And can we even talk about, if you do sell vape products, whether you're going to have to put them in the back store or in a box? Can we be very explicit about the do's and don'ts about how they can actually show it or not?
We can do that. And I guess I just want to respond to the first part of what you said. So as Lindsay had indicated previously, the retailer themselves, there really was no repercussion for them. With the TRLs, that's who we're targeting. That's who we're going after. So, there may be the license fee, they pay that, but if they're not compliant, there are repercussions, and they don't get that many multiple times. The first time there's a fee, the second time, there's a fee. At that point, we start talking about suspending their license. If we suspend their license, they can sell no products. And then that's where it really hurts the retailer. And again, we want to think that this is going to be educational, but we have to back that up with something, and that's our something. So, but yeah, Lindsay, if you want.
Yes, so I would say for the language, that really is a conversation between, you know, our legal, and I would say you all. Again, Hilliard has adopted an ordinance, and it may look different than Whitehall's ordinance. Whitehall just recently adopted an ordinance. And so, you know, that would be kind of based on the conversations we have with all of you, you know, and legal city attorney and such, that to come to some agreement and understanding based on the city's needs of Gahanna and the residents.
I'm not sure which version, if what you're looking at has the definitions of all the tobacco products, but we do spell that out. And that's sort of the language that we started with Hilliard. And I think, you know, that was included, but I think in the end, when the actual TRL was, or the ordinance was approved, what we're sharing is probably the condensed version that just highlights those specific areas that we're going to do and that they're going to do. But we do start with a definition section that talks about every tobacco product and what it means. So when we say, you know, flavored tobacco, what does that mean? And we define it. When we say vaping, we define it. So we do have to start there so that, you know, you, us, everyone understands what we're saying and what specifically is included in that ordinance.
Okay. The draft that we have before us is the one that was passed out at that meeting, that Thursday meeting.
Okay. So
So-
that didn't have the
No, it's
definition.
a definition. So there's a
Okay.
few edits, and certainly we can get the final
Yeah.
version.
you
Well,
can send
not
it-
final, but again, a draft.
Yeah, the template, and whatever you want us to start, you know, working on, you can get it to me, or you can get it to Jeremy, and Jeremy will make sure that he get everybody to council and the administration. And then the understanding of what other communities are doing or thinking about doing, I think that would also be very helpful, so we don't operate in the vacuum.
Absolutely. And that's why we're sharing as much as we can, because it will be easier on us if they're all similar, and that we don't have a ordinance in one city that says these things, but then we go to another city and they only say these two things. As much as possible, it would really be good if the cities were more alike. We know there may be some nuances, you know, based on your community, but for the most part, we're hoping they can be more similar than dissimilar.
Do we know how many, you know, places that have these in Gahanna?
We have nine businesses that specifically sell tobacco-related products, but that does not include the number of gas stations and those types of businesses that also sell those types of
Brokers and
products.
giant-
Grocery stores, gas stations, et cetera, right? CVS, pharmacies.
And
Mayor and Ms. Angelou, I pulled that list, including the convenience stores and the gas stations, and I believe it's 29.
yes. And I believe too, from the auditor, is that from
Yes.
the auditor's website? Yes, or data, because that is, so the auditor's data, again, looks at the cigarette retail license. But again, there are some caveats and businesses that don't fall under that state language, and therefore may not be required. And so that 29 may be skewed a little with having a few more. But we are working on the data, of course, and that is something we are looking to provide a snapshot for not just Gahanna, but also for all the other jurisdictions.
So, thank you. I think that brings up an important point, or at least a question that I have. Can you sort of explain that distinction of what it is the auditor's office is collecting or licensing versus what would be the goal with the template here?
Yes, yes. So the auditor from a local level just has that cigarette retail license. There's no necessarily compliance checks, underage buys associated with of that, that license. So the tobacco retail license from the local level would, again, based on the definitions that would be in the ordinance and the scope of work, could broaden the retailers, but then also enforce that compliance, the education, and then the underage buys and the penalties associated if out of compliance.
And we apologize. We weren't even thinking that you guys did not already have those definitions, because that really helps.
It's fine.
Thank you. We'll take whatever you've got.
We will get those to you tomorrow.
Ms. Padova, Ms. McGregor?
Go ahead. How long has Columbus had a ban?
I think shortly after the,
18?
yeah.
I want to say around 2018 was when their program, ban, are you talking flavored tobacco ban or
Well, like the
tobacco
one that we
retail
talked about
license?
This
This type of
legislation.
legislation.
This type of legislation? So I want to say it was in 2017, 18, that it had began. So they, yes, they have been kind of implementing this program for several years.
So, and how many licenses have been suspended or revoked? Maybe?
So that would,
Know that we can really tell you that because we don't get their data,
Yeah.
their information.
So-
Just like they won't get ours, but, so we
They're
could
not
probably
doing it-
ask.
They're not doing it through the Franklin County. They're doing
no,
it
so the
separately.
city of Columbus Public Health is implementing their program. Now, that's something we could reach out to see if they may be willing to share that data, at least on an aggregate level. And if they do provide that to us, we'd be happy to share with you all.
I will say that Columbus they came to the meeting that we had with all of our cities because they are very interested in us moving forward. And part of the reason is that, they put the compliance part in place, but if you live in Columbus, you just go to one of the suburbs and you buy your product. So it does benefit us all in the county if we're doing something similar.
Yes. So I have a few questions here. Thank you guys both for being here this evening. So did you say that the licensing, they won't receive the license until after they have completed the education part of this?
Right, we do the education first.
And would this also be used for like the grocery stores, and would you be educating like all of the employees that work for?
That would be our goal.
Okay.
The goal is all employees. Now we understand a Kroger or something along those lines may be difficult. So, we've discussed having some training online, video pre-recorded, that could maybe be, placed in a break room, kind of rolling, or part of a new hire orientation, or even, again, with those larger businesses, if it's something where we could do train the trainer. So we are open to options, understanding, it's much easier to educate a small convenience store of 4 to 5 employees and.
Yeah.
Right.
A little bit different
Yes.
there. And then currently, is there any type of education piece like this happening, like with the cigarette license, or is there anything at all, or is it just if you want to sell tobacco in Franklin County, you sell tobacco and?
From my understanding, I've had a couple conversations with the auditors and collecting their data on requests. And again, from my understanding, it's really a document that they fill out, the retailers fill out, they send it to the auditors. As long as everything's, I's dotted, T's are crossed, the retail license is then sent.
Okay. And then the fee, the $500 fee, or whatever amounts we would decide to make that, is that yearly, or is that just to get the license? Do you have to renew that every year? Okay.
And again, we looked at that. The $500 was based on to cover the costs of salary or time spent from our administrative staff, as well as a staff member who would be going out and doing the compliance checks and working with the businesses, educating the businesses. But then also some of that fee is to cover the signage costs.
Okay. And then currently you said that the state does underage buys. Do you have any idea like what that amount looks like in Franklin County? Like how many they do, how frequently?
When we say the state does, we're being kind. We do it on behalf of the state. So really, that's how it works.
We have this year, this grant year, we have 86 establishments but that is throughout the county and our jurisdictions. So knowing that is a very, very small percentage, that's maybe 10%, if that, of all of the retailers in Franklin County. So.
I think that's all for me right now.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you, and thank you as well, again, for being here. I'll echo some of the comments from our council members. As I shared with you at the beginning before the meeting started, I unfortunately had a stomach flu the last time we had the activist group here, so I appreciate you being here tonight to share more details on this. With that, I just want to make sure I'm understanding what Franklin County Public Health's role would be versus what the city's responsibilities would be. So we have a retailer here in the city, they have to go to you, they have to go through the education process, they pay $500 or whatever fee to be determined to you, which that you then use for the educational and signage, et cetera. And then from that point on, who bears the burden of enforcing and regular inspections or holding those folks accountable?
That's all us.
That's all you.
Yes, all the inspections, any retraining that needs to be done, additional signage they may request, all of that is us. And that's where I was saying we're trying to figure out the appeals process, because that may be the biggest part that the city would play, unless the city decided they wanted to have a different role. But right now, that's what we've been talking to most of the cities about. So pretty much everything involved in each aspect of the TRL is us doing that.
So in the template that was shared earlier, there's one section that talks about the city agrees to manage the civil penalty process. So was this specific to Hilliard, or is this something Hilliard decided to do? What,
Yes,
in other words, what is this?
Yeah. So, and I think the language has been changed a little bit to say appeals process versus the civil penalty. So what that is referring to is once a retailer is fined so many times and, we say, okay, they're just not in compliance, so we're revoking their license, then the city has to enforce that. Because at that point.
After the revocation of the license?
Yes, we're thinking the revocation part means you can't sell. And so the question becomes, if they do continue to sell, you know, we at that point don't have any authority to go in and make them stop. And so that's where Hilliard was saying, okay, they're gonna utilize their, I think, police to go in and close them down. As we do with our other programs that have to be shut down, say if it was a food establishment, we would go in and put up, you know, the signage
Right.
that says
You
their
would be
license is
handling that,
revoked
right.
and all of that. But once we do that, then our role, because we're not there in the community, so it's like, do you want to have that part as part of your TRL to say, if your license is revoked or even suspended, what is the city's role? What are we going to do to make sure that they don't continue to sell?
Mr. City Attorney.
I kind of thought you might have a question after that one.
I'm trying to figure out how this is going to work too, because under section 5C, it says the prosecutor's office will be responsible for any litigation, which would make it a criminal offense, although I'm hearing you want this to be a civil offense and not a criminal offense. And if it's not a criminal offense, then we don't have a vehicle in place to handle any of this, so we'd have to establish another board, just to let you know how this would have to work to do this. And then who brings the allegations of a violation? Is that you?
Yes.
Okay.
All of that will be provided by us. We do the inspections, we would write up the language that says they're not in compliance and here's why. Here's what we found. There may even be pictures because, you know, we want to make sure that we're accurate and fair. Yes, this does, Hilliard, they elected to have a civil penalty, but, and they're saying they're going to enforce that part of it. They have decided that.
Because if we were to create another board, then you have a whole nother administrative process
Right.
with the extra expense related to that. That's why I'm just trying to figure out what the best way to go through. Should council decide that they want to go this route, what is the best way from an administrative standpoint?
Has there been dialogue with the county prosecutor's office?
So the county prosecutors are, yes, they have reviewed and signed off, and any agreement that we have with the city, they are also signing off on it.
Okay. And so then to let you know, this also refers to a section about nuisance, which we could talk about. We'd have to amend our nuisance statute to include this as well. It's just.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. McGregor.
Have, you said there's a lot of places, not in a city, but within Franklin County that sell tobacco products. Have you instituted this licensing within Franklin County?
Only with Dublin, and theirs is not this extensive, but theirs is also up for renewal now. And so they will also be adopting this ordinance.
When you say, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, but so you haven't, so Franklin County doesn't have one for the, how do I say, the part of the county that's not within another city?
So are you talking about the townships and?
Yeah,
But
well, that'd be
unincorporated?
townships, you know, anything outside of a city that's
So,
Franklin County, like where the sheriffs would patrol, like the sheriff's department.
right, so unfortunately, we are unable to, so part of, trying to say this correctly. So with home rule,
Unincorporated, that's what I was trying to say.
unincorporated, yes, yes. So, yes, we do not have, for tobacco retail license authority. And so we can work with cities, we can work with villages, but unincorporated or townships is something that we cannot pass or enforce.
So when you said Dublin was up for renewal, is that because the TRL that they did was only for, was that a temp?
It's just their contract.
Their
was,
contract, okay. So what was the period of the contract term? Was it?
So the contract is yearly, but with the modifications, well, I should take that back.
Yes.
The licensing is yearly
Right.
for Dublin.
The contract can be however many years
Yes.
you elect. You could do an annual contract, you can do a 2-year contract. I think their contract was at least 2 years, and so this year it's up for renewal. They also put theirs in place about the same time as Columbus, 2017, 2018. And so this is their renewal period. And since we're now doing this on a wider scope, instead of just renewing the contract that they had, they're going to come into compliance with what we're doing with all the other cities.
Do you know if they've had theirs in place for that long, how many either suspensions, revocations of license issues you've had to deal with?
Not very many. I don't know the number because, again, they did not have the full scope of work. So we just really, with them, did, I think, 1 inspection a year. And that's why, we're talking to them now about, you got to come into compliance with what we're doing now.
So they don't have anything, do they have anything in place that were, like Hilliard, if Hilliard chose to say unilaterally that we'll take care of this, did Dublin didn't do something similar, where they're enforcing on their own?
No.
So besides Dublin, Hilliard, you mentioned Whitehall?
Whitehall had just recently, last week, passed their ordinance.
I'm sorry, I just started going, I
no.
apologize.
So they just passed their ordinance, so we are in conversations with them to begin that discussion on
Whitehall.
a scope of work and contract.
Are there any other municipalities or cities around central Ohio that have this in place, or?
Reynoldsburg,
Reynoldsburg.
Upper Arlington has been in discussion. Again, Dublin is looking to modify, and
Westerville is in conversation. It's probably easier to say who's not at this point, who we're not having conversations with yet. So, and there's just
Oh,
a
I know, you're
few.
doing your road show, I get it, it's all good. I was just trying to understand which cities have taken the official step of actually affecting that, implementing and affecting legislation.
So I believe Reynoldsburg has had 2 readings, and then it was the holidays.
Okay.
So I don't know if they've scheduled
they are in their legislative
third
process. Okay.
reading or not. And Bexley, we look for them to really kind of push theirs through quickly. They're kind of all in. Upper Arlington as well. So these are the folks, and I think Upper Arlington, they've scheduled their first reading. Those are the ones I can think of right now.
Thank you, I apologize.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Renner?
Yeah, so again, you guys are going to give us a list so they'll know what all communities and what are the variations and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
that'll be good, that'll be helpful. Thank you so much. Don't want to put you on the spot and try to remember everything, but I know that there's quite a large number there of having various conversations with you, so.
Ms. Patovich, I see your hand up.
Yeah, so you said Hilliard has already voted on this, and it's currently in place?
yes,
Or?
it's passed. We are, again, working on just finalizing the scope of work and contract. and kind of scheduling, setting a start date to begin the education with the retailers, announcing kind of the TRL, and so forth, so.
So I guess my question is kind of like, how does that look once this, once you get the scope of services completely like ironed out, everybody, I's are dotted, T's are crossed, then how do you guys get started with that from there? And how long does that take to actually start like doing the reviews and all of that?
So we've started, because there are a lot of behind-the-scene things that have to happen. So our communications folks are involved, because they will be both designing, the signage, but also helping to get the word out. So whether that's a city deciding to do press release, or us putting it on our website, the city's putting it on their website, however we choose, to get the word out, it's going to be some communications folks that need to be a part of that, on social media, all of that. At that point, the application itself will be posted on our website and on the city's website, because we're thinking most retailers will go to the city's website first. And so once they go into the application from there, it comes to us. Our staff will process the application, and then that gets the ball rolling in our database. So that retailer is then, they're flagged in our database. Our staff are in the process of training for the database system. So there also are the person that's going to be our inspector. He is also in training and going out this past year, or last year, going out with our inspector in our environmental health division that is inspecting in Dublin. So he's been learning. So we're already working on all those parts and pieces internally. Once the application is processed, then our inspector will go out, engage the retailer. They will set up time for the training, the educational piece, and really walk through the signage and all of that information with whomever the retailer is telling us to work with. And then once all of those things pass and, are completed, then the license will be issued. And then sort of the clock starts at that point. And then in our database, our system lets us know when it's time to go out and do the compliance checks. We will build in there the underage buys. So all of those things get built into our system, and our inspector, will complete those. There's letters, there's paperwork, there's all those things that are mainly generated by our system, but of course, someone has to input the data and information. So hopefully that answered your question. So we're doing a lot of work now. What we've been saying to the cities that think they're going to be ready to go soon is that March is sort of we are flipping the switch then. March will be ready.
Okay, so if Reynoldsburg, Upper Arlington, Bexley, Whitehall, Westerville, all of these municipalities were all to approve this, you guys have the capacity to, if we're talking about probably 30-ish just in Gahanna, that's going to be a lot of applications, but you guys feel that you have or will have the capacity to do that once?
So I'll be real transparent with you. We don't have the capacity, but we're going to make the capacity. So we have an inspector, and our environmental health division has an inspector. They are willing to assist us until we can really, take off and get the program up and running. So it's just going to be kind of all hands on deck, and we're going to be pulling in staff where we need to make it work until we can sufficiently support hiring another inspector. We already know we're going to have to do that. Just looking at the number of retailers, one person cannot handle that.
Ms. Angelou?
I was just wondering, what's the length of the training? I mean, is it week, or is it months, or what? Days?
Well, go ahead, Nancy.
So I would say, a typical training that our environmental health staff have done in the past is approximately an hour to 2 hours. Now, we are looking to enhance some of our training efforts, and then also provide a little more information about cessation resources. That is something that currently our training, it touches on a little bit about the Ohio Quit Line, but looking at more of a holistic and local level approach to offering services beyond just the Quit Line. And so that is something, though, again, we can work with city council, or, if there's certain aspects or requirements that you all feel would hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours is not long enough, certainly we could have those discussions.
Thank you.
Thank you both sincerely for coming to council this evening. Do appreciate your time. I think to put a bow on this, I want to underscore Mr. Renner's point. We're going to anticipate some additional information from you, and thank you. If you'll send that to the clerk, it's probably the best way to get it to everybody. I think from a legislative standpoint, particularly interested in some of the ordinances that the surrounding communities are taking a look at. But then also, I want to underscore that we've been provided with a template, and as a council, as an administration, as our community, we will shape and tailor this to our community's needs. So I just want to highlight, some of it looks maybe we have questions about, but some of those questions are able to be ironed out, and maybe that doesn't fit perfectly for our community. But that to say, thank you very much. Anything else,
Thank you.
colleagues? Yes, ma'am.
What the protocol is, but I just, Lindsay brought it up, but we would be remiss if we did not push this, because we are about health. We are encouraging cities that do take on a TRL that they also think about cessation efforts. Individuals, we talked about tobacco is addicting. So individuals get addicted to the tobacco, and that's a disease. We consider that a disease. And so quitting is not easy. It may take 2, 3, 4 attempts, and we should be supportive, and we should help residents to quit if that's, their desire. But just something we strongly want all the cities to think about and to consider. Quitting is not easy, and we want to be as helpful with that. We never want to be punitive as we can. So just wanted to end with that.
Thank you.
Thank you all for having us here and for listening, and we hope this was helpful. We will definitely get you additional information.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Next up, letter C, items from council office. First, we have motion 0003-2023. Mr. Gordon.
My name is Nathan Gordon. I'm an attorney for the applicant. Is this on? I'm not real astute at certain things. Again, I'll just say, my name is Nathan Gordon, and I really appreciate this. Can I take it home with me?
Absolutely.
Okay. I've been practicing liquor law for a long time, and I've done other licenses in Gahanna, including United Dairy Farmers, Local Cantina, Mod Pizza, but I have never been in front of City Council. I've always appreciated what you've been able to do to help us get those licenses issued. This is a different situation. The current site at 505 Morrison Road currently has what is called an A license. That is because they're brewing on the premises. The new tenant will not be brewing on the premises, therefore he cannot use that A license, needs to get what we call a D license, and that's what we're bringing in here. So the net gain will be zero. The A license will go away, the D license will come into the site. Unfortunately, Gahanna has no licenses available right now, so Ohio law permits us to bring one in from another jurisdiction. That sometimes doesn't make sense, but that's what the law provides. Be happy to answer any questions regarding it.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Questions? Yes, Ms. Bowers.
Just for the record, any objections from law enforcement?
None.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
I knew you had something to do.
Turn the microphone on.
Mrs. McGregor.
Where does the license come from? I mean, specifically?
This specific license is coming from Columbus
Okay.
to Gahanna. Under Ohio law, you can take a license from any jurisdiction to another jurisdiction with the approval of the jurisdiction where you're taking it. That's why this is in front of you, because we need the specific approval of the city of Gahanna before we can file the transfer application.
Okay.
Ohio law, I don't know what you know about Ohio liquor law, but Ohio liquor law is based on quotas. Licenses are issued based on the number of people in a jurisdiction, not the number of people who come into the jurisdiction, but those who reside. So in some cases, the numbers are misleading because more people come in probably to Gahanna than live here. And therefore, there are not enough licenses. Ohio really should probably do away with the quota system, but I hope they don't do that until I retire. 'Cause I don't want to have to deal with something new. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, colleagues? Thank you, Mr. Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Thank everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we okay with consent for this then?
Sure.
All right, thank you. Next up, Resolution 003-2023, resolution recognizing February 2023 as Black History Month. Ms. Bowers?
Yes, thank you. As I think we started last year, we wanted to make sure that we were recognizing the contributions of Black and African American residents of our community. We have in here from information that we from last that regarding the Big Walnut Country Club. That received the first historical marker in Gahanna last year. So we've included that, and thank you to Jeremy for including that in the resolution. As an honorary or a ceremonial recipient of the resolution, Miss Indigo Stanley, a resident of Gahanna, she and her family reside, I think, off of Fleet Run here near the City Hall. She is Miss Black Ohio America for 2022 and a student at The Ohio State University in undergraduate studies where she is studying education. So Ms. Stanley will be joining us as a ceremonial recipient of the resolution, and will be speaking a little bit about Black history and to us on the 6th of February. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bowers. Any questions, comments from colleagues? Thank you, Ms. Bowers, for your work on the resolution. Mr. Clerk,
Mr.
thank
Clerk.
you. Appreciate it. Yes, Ms. McGregor.
Is there some way we can incorporate in that it was because the Historical Society did one of our members did the research on the Big Walnut Country Club that, with a grant from the Ohio Humanities Council, that found the information on the Big Walnut Country Club? I mean, nobody knew it was even there before. Is there a way we can put that in a little?
Sure, yeah, I mean.
Unless
happy
somebody has an
whatever
objection to
the
that.
council-
I think we can thank, and I'm blanking on her name right now, but the researcher that was.
Oh, Christy Evans?
Christy Evans, yes, yes.
So as a matter of process, if we do that, will we have to amend the ordinance? No? Okay, we're going to sub it right? Great.
It hasn't been
We
introduced.
can make that edit and circulate it, and then I did want to just mention, and thank you to Mr. Renner and to Mr. Weaver. I think that the process has been working really nicely with having the actual resolution on the consent agenda, but doing a ceremonial presentation if we have someone available during hearing of visitors. So I would be in favor of continuing that process. I think it's worked out nicely.
This is great. I mean, I'm glad that it kind of comes timely because we just dedicated it in September, so that's a great thing to incorporate in this.
Thank you, Mrs. McGregor, for that suggestion. Is everyone okay with consent for this as well, then? All right, moving right along, ordinance 4-2023, ordinance to amend Gahanna Code, Chapter 157, Records Management Program. I'll turn this over to you, Mr. Clerk.
Sure. We also have other members of the Records Commission here that are welcome to speak, should they desire. This is a recommendation from the Records Commission to amend the code, basically to add the words designee as appointed by the mayor or as appointed by the city attorney for those positions that are outlined in code. Gives us a little bit more flexibility, also helps us adapt and respond to the recent reorganization within the city.
Any other comments from members of the Records Commission? I hate to go a meeting without Mr. Schultz speaking, but yeah.
Make you feel better?
I do feel better with your mug, Mr. Milarski. Thank you. So, okay with on for first and then consent? All right. Last up, item D, ordinance 5-2023, ordinance to authorize the mayor to enter into an agreement with the Gahanna Community Improvement Corps. Director Strom?
Just get to the podium, let's go.
I'm Betty Collins, and I'm a resident of Gahanna, and I am the president of the CIC of Gahanna.
Welcome.
And I am not Teresa Seagraves. I am Nate Strum with the Director of Economic Development here to answer any questions you may have this evening.
I think, first, President Collins, thank you for being here this evening. I think Council had a wonderful opportunity to join the CIC at the end of December. For me, this is my second year serving as a member of the CIC, so I thank President Renner for that appointment, but it's been truly a pleasure to serve and also to work with you, Ms. Collins, so I want to just thank you for your leadership on the board. I think we'd be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to say, or do you have any updates that you'd like to share with the work of the CIC?
The simple answer is not at this time. The longer answer, we're hoping to have a public engagement piece surrounding some of the work of the CIC and its various holdings in late February. I'll make sure to include Jeremy on any final announcements of what that agenda could look like, location, time, etc.
Any questions from my colleagues
couple.
Yes, Mrs. McGregor.
Not having looked at this, in section 2C, it says was assigned to Wide Open West Finance. Now it's Breeze Line. Does that wording have to be changed?
In talking with our council, Wide Open West or WOW was fully absorbed by Breezeline, so all its holdings are still within Breezeline, but all Breezeline holdings are within WOW, if that makes sense. So we can keep it either way you would like, but I think
Okay.
it's more accurate that WOW still is referenced there because all holdings of WOW are part of that Breezeline entity. And it still exists. We still get WOW statements, actually, from them.
Okay. And then I thought it was interesting, section E, I just wanted to read it. The assist in the promotion and continued development of the commercial, historical, cultural, and natural resources, including but not limited to Creekside District and the Office Commercial and Technology District. And I guess I'd never read that part about the historical, cultural, and we always hear about the commercial part, but I don't remember reading that before, just so I thought that was worth stating. Also, are there any properties in the land bank now?
There are. The CIC currently has 14, 15, somewhere in that neighborhood. So the CIC took down 8 properties at the end of last year as part of a large-scale transaction through our real estate holding entity called Taylor Holdings. And then we had additional 2 properties over the course of last year, plus the existing holdings that we currently have at the Kumon building and a few rental homes and vacant property on the west side.
Could we get a list of those homes?
You're welcome to do it. Yes.
Okay. And then, I think that's it. Okay, that was it. I just didn't remember. Didn't know I knew that they were going to purchase the properties. I didn't know they were held in the land bank. That was not, I didn't understand.
And I would add, actually, it was several years ago when CIC purchased property on the west side that was for the projected Stigler-Eigler 62
Right, I remember those.
project.
There's
And we're
2
still
lots.
holding those because that still needs to be
Those 2
resolved as
lots.
to what the best course of action for that intersection is, correct?
Right, so meanwhile, the 2 houses are fully rented out, and the land is just vacant.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any other questions? Consent, okay? Oh, sorry, Ms. Doe.
Just a comment, I just want to thank you guys for being here tonight and also for the engagement with council. We've been invited, I think, to 2 meetings now that I've gone to, and it was a good opportunity for at least myself to kind of see a little bit more of what you guys do and understand how it benefits our community. So thank you for serving on the CIC.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pleasure to serve in the position. I'm a big believer in the economic development of the city and business, and their council, the administration, and CIC should work hand in hand because it's all about Gahanna. You can come every month if you'd like, do the meetings. I think it's the 3rd Tuesday, but I mean, we want council there. It's extremely important that there is engagement there, so we're all on the same page with it because it's a pretty big deal. It's a big deal sometimes what we're moving and shaking and trying to do the development. So I love serving, and it's a great thing for me. One way you can give your city is by serving on stuff like this, and I like to do it. Even with Nate Strum,
Yeah, I'm a bit of a pill.
yeah.
I will note to President Collins, we also, to help some of that transparency and understand what's going on with the CIC, we have launched GahannaCIC.com as a website resource. In there, you'll have our year-end financials, our up-to-date minutes from prior meetings, contact information for the operation, some of the activities that we've been doing. That's been a labor of love for the past 12 months, so we'll hopefully use that as a really nice vehicle of some of the work that we've been doing from the CIC's perspective. Also highlighting to your point, actually, now that you've mentioned that, Councilwoman McGregor, I'm even thinking about trying to figure out a widget to highlight properties held by the CIC. So you actually have a live map on the land banking page. That shouldn't be that big of a lift, actually, if I think about it. It's just using ArcGIS. So happy to keep having those conversations about how we can bring that value into the conversation.
Yes, Ms. Bowers.
I'm just going to piggyback just very quickly on that, on your comment about the website getting launched, and again, reiterate my gratitude and thanks for taking that step. It's definitely been brought up to me over the years about just accessing minutes of the CIC, and so having that ability to see what's been going on, get those financials, it just helps build so much credibility with the important work that is going on. So thank you.
Is on for first and then consent, okay with everyone?
And I'll have that listing probably tomorrow to Jeremy for everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Director. Thank you, President Collins. Absent anything else, we are adjourned.